thought this was for the Metro review? Oh no, I just got done walking through the streets of London. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name's Oliver. I hate the video game industry about as much as it hates me. In a world full of pseudo-intellectual gaming YouTubers and full-time video game journalists who can't figure out the tutorial to Cuphead, I have crawled out of the abyss known as the United Kingdom to grace you with my divine being. It's been a hectic month in the video game industry so far, as every major publisher has decided to release their games all at the same time. This is probably because they looked at Red Dead Redemption 2 and said, nope, not releasing near that. After scanning all the major games releasing in February, it's become pretty clear that Metro Exodus is the only one that has the potential to be good. I mean, look, you've got Anthem, which is made by BioWare and EA, so you know it's going to be a complete train wreck. You've got Crackdown 3, which made me laugh for about a solid 2 minutes as I slowly died inside, remembering when Microsoft actually cared. You know, before they started fucking around with Connectimals. Jump Force looked like a mediocre fighting game, which turned out to be a mediocre fighting game. There's the new uninspired Far Cry game after a long list of uninspired Far Cry games, because Ubisoft knows you dumbasses will buy it. Which you did. Thank you very much. Metro was the only game out of all of these that I looked at and didn't automatically hate, so we're doing that one. The Metro series is a post-apocalyptic survival first-person shooter set in Russia, developed by 4A Games, and I've never really understood the obsession with them. I mean, I understand the obsession with the Stalker series, but I've never understood the obsession with this. There really isn't anything special about them, but to be such a small developer to pull off something like what they did, to be honest, it's pretty impressive. I think the reason for the obsession was the Stalker series. Those games had the same concept, but with an even smaller team, with an even bigger idea. The result of this, of course, was the game was practically unstable and doesn't work. But the reason people still mod the Stalker games and talk about them extensively to this day was because there isn't really anything like it. It wasn't the games people fell in love with, it was more the concept. The thing that stopped Stalker from just being another survival horror game was the world. The game had such a thick, haunting atmosphere that really helped you look past the game's faults. Accompany that with how hardcore it is and it becomes an absolutely terrifying experience. There was undoubtedly a demand for this kind of game, it's just that a AAA studio would never make it because a majority of gamers would not enjoy it due to how difficult it is. The reason people look at the Metro series as this shining light in the darkness is because it's the closest we'll ever get to a AAA Stalker game. And Metro Exodus is probably the closest yet. Metro Exodus, after 6 years, aims to get the series back on track. So what did I think of it? Well, it's certainly the best Metro game yet. It's actually good. I thoroughly enjoyed my 20 or so something hours in it. It recaptures the great shooting in the world of the last two games, puts it on a much grander scale. There are points in this game where I felt like I was playing a AAA Stalker game. Anyway, start a review, I can't be bothered anymore.
It's amazing how something as overdone as a post-apocalyptic setting can still look so damn beautiful when done correctly. Metro Exodus takes the player out of the dark tunnels of the Metro and has you roam around the dead wasteland of Russia. The presentation is without a doubt the game's strongest aspect. The ambient sounds of the wind and the occasional cry of monsters off in the distance makes the journey from one destination to the next feel like a dangerous one. Accompany that with no music and you find yourself reacting to the nearest sound out of instinct. The sound is very well done. The guns have such a loud, meaty feel to them, especially when let off inside a cramped tunnel. The choice to have no music is such a brilliant decision, because with these games you want to feel as alone and vulnerable as possible. When music is used, it's during intense firefights, and it's surprisingly really good. It has a very strong, epic orchestral score, which you'd expect to hear in an action movie, along with some toned down beating of drums when exploring some areas, which can help instill that feel of uneasiness. I feel that taking the game out of the Metro kind of lost that truly isolating feeling of the previous games, which at points is recaptured, but is never quite there. This is partially due to deciding to take the game into this open world setting, but is also due to the fact in this game you have a squad that you go back to every hour or so. They are also always contacting you. Knowing that your home base isn't too far away kind of kills that feeling of being alone, which is a shame. However, this is counterbalanced by the diversity of the areas in this game. Not only do you visit multiple locations both underground and on the surface, but also the seasons change. This stops the game from feeling drawn out and repetitive. I think this is the main reason I didn't get sick of it after 20 hours. Going from nuclear winter to nuclear desert to nuclear forest keeps the game feeling fresh. It also helps that you spend about the same amount of time in each area. The small details of ruin and corpses scattered about really add to the authenticity of the environments. It's quite clear the developers put a lot of thought into how each area is presented to the player, and it shows. Also, oh my god, let me talk about the lighting, it's so great. It serves an important purpose during stealth as enemies won't be able to see you as well, but really where it shines is navigating underground. The Metro games never had an issue with making crawling through tunnels with just a lighter look so damn good. The burning of cobwebs and entering a room and lighting it up is strangely satisfying. Monster design, while a little uninteresting, is still effective. It can scare the shit out of you if you're not paying attention to your surroundings. Now there is an issue with voice acting. It isn't awful, but certainly isn't great. I feel like a lot of people are being a bit too hard on it. I think its biggest issue is that the line delivery is kind of 50-50. Sometimes it's fine, other times it's noticeably bad. I've heard playing the game in Russian is the definitive way to play, so if the voice acting bothers you, there is an option to switch to Russian audio with English subtitles. It also probably helps with immersion. That's about the only problem I have with the presentation. Overall, the game looks spectacular and definitely captures that decrepit world of post-apocalyptic Russia. Now, the stories of the previous Metro games are, well, let's just say it's pretty difficult to remember any of it. Exodus, however, while certainly better, I wouldn't go as far as to call it good. It is interesting, but only because of your interest in the world and where your magic train might take you next. It isn't emotionally gripping at all, which would be fine if the story wasn't a huge focus, except it is. You'd think a game based on a book would have an advantage with this, although I haven't read the book, or any book for that matter, but that's not the point. Metro Exodus takes place after the last game, or the last lie. Once again, players take control of Artyom as he goes on another suicide mission, except this time he's not alone. He's got a whole crew this time along with his new wife from the last game. They all set out on a magical adventure across destroyed Russia on their newly acquired train, in order to find a new place to live that isn't inhabited by death. You know what this means. More horrifying monsters, bloodthirsty bandits, and whatever else the radiation cooked up. The plot is obviously set up just so Artyom can almost die another 1,000 times. Although of course the plot has a little bit more to it than that, but I can't talk about that without spoiling it. I think my biggest issue with the story is that they never give you a reason to give a shit about any of the characters. Aside from the Colonel, most of the characters are basically just, "Ah, Diom, you're the best, now come on, let's go get killed." They're not really given the screen time or attention they need in order for you to feel attached to them. Now, the issue with the story not being that investing is that, especially in the first 5 hours or so of the game, there are long sequences of listening to people talk as you stand around doing nothing. They're not unbearable like most Ubisoft games, it's just that they go on for far too long. Anytime you're not roaming the wasteland or getting shot at, the game is at a disadvantage. Okay, it's time to talk about the Gordon Freeman effect. The main advantage of the first-person perspective is the ability to make the player feel like they're there. It is an easy way of doing immersion and is the reason a majority of horror games choose to be in first person. The Gordon Freeman effect amplifies this by having your main character not speak. Metro Exodus uses this, and I completely understand why. Whenever you're alone in some dark cavern covered in radiation, this works really well mostly due to the brilliant design and care that's gone into each area. But the issue comes with the fact that Artyom is a character. He's not Gordon Freeman who's completely alone on a mission to get the hell out of Black Mesa. This therefore breaks the immersion whenever a friendly NPC interacts with you, as he doesn't utter a word, making sequences feel awkward. This especially doesn't work when they're trying to build a romantic relationship. Any scene with Anna feels weird and uncomfortable, as this effect makes it so the main character is supposed to be you, but it's not you. The Gordon Freeman effect worked in previous games because you were alone for a majority of the time. You really should have had him talk. You can do this as well as have him not talk during actual gameplay and it would have worked fine. At least Dead Space 2 understood this. Now that's not to say the writing is all bad. The world building is brilliant. The world is what entirely saves this game from being mediocre. Even though the characters aren't well written, they're all realistic. Every interesting faction you run into and the way exposition is given to the player makes the game feel a lot more immersive. I found myself always listening to the enemies you run into to find out what crazy shit they believe in. For example, the first faction you run into is this crazy technophobic cult that believes electricity was created by the devil. So whenever you walk into their areas, they're all using candles, spouting religious nonsense, and as soon as you cap one in the head, they all start screaming heresy. It continues to be interesting throughout the entire journey, and the world is definitely what makes this game memorable. The story does bring back the karma system from the last game, which will affect not only what ending you get, but how certain characters will interact with you. And this time, you don't have to play every fucking instrument in Russia to get the good ending. It's as simple as just don't be a dick. This time, however, you don't have to knock out everyone, only those who don't deserve to die. You are free to slaughter as many bandits as you want, which I think was a good decision. The first hour or so of Metro Exodus was fairly concerning. I saw some pretty weird shit, and the entire thing is heavily scripted. This is not a good first impression for a game that boasts about heavily relying on exploration and freedom. Thankfully though, you're put into Metro's genius new design choice. The open world. Oh no. Well, it's not really an open world, it's semi-open world. They're more like big levels than an open world, which is actually a good idea for the series, I think. The idea of traversing the zone from the Stalker series once more with a new coat of paint is intriguing, and with every open world, there is one thing you gotta make sure you get right. Now, everyone, gather round. I'm going to tell you one of the most important things in game design. And I mean it, like, get a piece of paper out because you're probably gonna hear me say this a lot. Exploration is the most engaging thing you can do in a video game. If you get your player to go off on their own to somewhere you didn't tell them to go, and they feel like they were rewarded for it, you've done it. You've got them. The reason you can play games like Skyrim for hours on end is because the game is constantly encouraging you to do your own thing. This is also the reason the open world genre is so popular. So, does Metro do exploration correctly? Well, kind of, but not really. There isn't much incentive to explore areas outside of where the game tells you to go. Now, I'm not saying this is a negative exactly, because most of the areas marked on your map are optional, so you're still in the way of capturing that essence of going out of your way to explore. The optional areas are enjoyable to go through thanks to the excellent combat. The issue comes with the reward. You will often find in these areas new pieces of equipment and weapon attachments, but I never once felt like I got a significant upgrade for doing so. I've seen a lot of people praise this, and I feel like you've sort of been tricked by it. The moment you realize attachments and gear aren't that important, and that you find enough of them from playing the game normally, is the moment you stop caring. So then you think, well Oliver, surely you're rewarded with ammo and supplies. Which you are, but there are two problems with this. One, you have to spend ammo on God knows what infested place so you can come out the other end with basically the same amount of supplies. And two, they kind of fucked up the survival aspect. Well, they didn't fuck it up, the ideas are here. I love the fact that you need to maintain your guns or they'll jam, and managing all your supplies, but I really don't think they did it harshly enough. Trust me, I really do like the survival aspects. I haven't seen gun jamming since Far Cry 2, which is something I believe way more games should have, and I love the fact that you can swap out attachments whenever to adapt to situations. So, in order to maintain weapons and craft stuff, you need crafting materials and this weird chemical stuff that you find out in the world by looting dead bodies and scrapping weapons. The thing is that I only ever ran out of materials in the first area. After that I never ran out of that or ammo. You can only craft ammo and maintain your guns at crafting benches, which you run into about every 40 minutes. Don't get me wrong, on the hardest difficulty you absolutely need to look around and loot everything you see. But that should have been what you need to do in order to just about get by. I feel like I should have constantly been scavenging for bullets, so whenever I do find ammo I'm like, oh thank fuck ammo! You shouldn't ever have a situation where you're well stocked on supplies. Resident Evil 2 just came out and did this pretty well, and was much more enjoyable because of it. I don't think you should be allowed to craft medkits on the spot, although it doesn't really matter since you die in 2 shots anyway. Overall, if I was constantly wanting to explore and the game was kicking the shit out of me, the game would have been a lot more engaging. I'm not saying exploration and scavenging was done badly, you still need to search everything, and it is indeed satisfying. I'm saying it could have been done much better. As far as the open world itself goes, it's fairly deadly and you do want to avoid any contact as much as possible. It is roaming with all sorts of horrible shit that will not hesitate to kill you, helping keep the player on their toes. There is also a great day and night cycle that lets players approach situations differently. In the daytime there will be less monsters and anomalies, but bandits will be awake and roaming about, and during night, most human enemies will be asleep, but the wasteland is going to throw everything it has at you. I will say though, the anomalies are disappointing. They are about as threatening as my grandma, and she's dead. A majority of the game though takes place in sectioned off areas, which I guess you can classify as story missions. All these missions, especially after the first area of the game, are great. They are always tense, engaging, and are without a doubt where the game shines the most. Of course, all of this would suck if the gunplay was bad. Luckily, the first person shooting in Metro is practically perfect. Playing on the hardest difficulty where getting shot twice kills you helps capture this realistic feeling of gunplay. The sweet satisfaction of shooting a guy once, watching him drop along with the excellent sound design, makes combat always tense and enjoyable. Taking on 10 people at once in an open area is exactly what you think it would be. It's basically suicide. I love this decision to try and make the firefights as realistic as possible. There are no indicators, you can't tag people and see them through walls. You have to completely rely on what you see and hear. If you are ever trying to create tension in an FPS, this is exactly how you do it. Not only this, but the AI is excellent. They'll take cover and never rush you. You won't get situations in this game where you can sit by one entrance and just shoot enemies that blindly run into your bullets. Hearing the communication between the enemies as they go from overconfident to terrified as you slowly start to pick them off is fantastic.
How can this be, brethren? They are killing our people!
There are situations where they will realize how many people are left and then surrender. Every aspect of the gameplay is done to help keep this feeling of realism and immersion. It's not just the humans who will surrender either. The monsters will also run away to go find other friends to come overwhelm you. If you like shooters, this is as good as it gets. Stealth is heavily encouraged, but also as with real life, you can't see people through walls. There are no detection indicators, and enemies won't just stop caring just because they lost you. If you stick to the shadows and don't fire any bullets, you'll be fine. Of course, that's a lot easier said than done.
The Titan is there!
There are more monsters in this game than the other Metros, although sadly, other than 2 or 3 exceptions, they all attack you the same way. It's a little disappointing knowing what crazy shit was in the Stalker games, but thankfully having hordes of mutated creatures overwhelm you is still just as tense as it ever was. In Stalker you had things like poltergeists, these controller things that made me want to die. They were always damn terrifying, and I think it would have been great to see more variety as the monsters lose their charm about halfway through the game. It's a lot more fun to fight the humans than the monsters, but at least there is a good balance between the two, so you never feel like you're getting tired of fighting either. The monster AI sometimes gets stuck on things and it fucks up their pathfinding. It's not all the time, but it's noticeable. One more issue I have is that there are too many scripted sequences. When you do set pieces, you should really only do 2 or 3 of them, because once the player realizes the game's gone into cutscene mode, the sense of danger disappears, which you should probably avoid in your tense survival horror game. Also, stop with the stupid quicktime events, the same issue applies.
Overall, Metro Exodus is one of the best FPS games to come out in recent years. It's a 7 out of 10, which on my scale means it's a solid game. If you enjoyed the last 2, then I don't even need to tell you to buy this game, because you probably already have. The world and its ability to recapture this realistic feeling is definitely what saves it from being a mediocre game. Of course, it could have been done much better, so improvements. The game's pretty buggy. I didn't run into any game-breaking bugs, but I know they're in there. I did have a bug where my map marker was wrong, so I had to pretty much just guess where I was supposed to go. I understand you're a smaller studio and there's only a certain level of polish you can reach, but maybe having one autosave slot probably wasn't a good idea. If you're on PC, I'd recommend you back up your save multiple times. Story, once again, isn't good. It's interesting, but it's not emotionally gripping at all, making those really long talking sequences feel even longer. The survival is too easy. I don't think you should have given me the ability to craft anything. I really think you should have focused on the scavenging aspect, since crafting pretty much kills any worth of anything you pick up. Exploration needs more incentive. You really need to balance that risk and reward a little bit more. I mean, you could have told sectioned off stories in these little side areas. That could have been pretty cool. The monster variety gets stale, as all of them tend to be just the same thing, and the anomalies kind of suck. You only really realize it in this game because the game's twice as long as the last 2. Stop using all these scripted sequences, the QuickTime events, that just cut them out of every game ever. And stop using the Gordon Freeman effect. There's so many games that use it incorrectly and it's pissing me off. There is absolutely no reason you can't knock it out the park with the next game if you decide to make one. 4A are obviously a very talented studio who did indeed succeed in bringing this world to life. I also find it funny how it's the only major game that released in February that was actually any good. I love the gaming industry. So, until next time, and I can't wait to see how the video game industry pisses me off next. Until then. Oh my god, it's the first review, it's over! We did it! Oh my god! This is where it begins. This is it. This is it, me and you. Me and you, just me and you. Because no one's gonna watch this channel, let's be honest. We're gonna make it. We're gonna build an empire, we're gonna take over the world. This is it. I'm the only goddamn honest